Our mission on this expedition was to go out and film the wreck site of U-21. U-21 really gains its relevance in relationship to the Hunley. Hunley was the very first submarine to ever make a kill in warfare. And that act was not repeated until the beginning of the First World War, when U-21 torpedoed and sank Pathfinder, a British light cruiser. These two vessels are incredibly important vessels in the history of marine warfare, and they really, the Hunley marked the very beginning, and then U-21 marked the absolute beginning of the predominance of submarines as a weapon of war. We left in July, and we left going directly to coordinates that Clive and his NUMA team had marked in 1984 when they first went out and side-scanned the site. After towing the side-scan sonar for about 2 hours, we discovered that we did not have a shipwreck nearby. We had covered a fair amount of area around the coordinates that we had been given, and no shipwreck. This happens when you're searching for shipwrecks. You end up in these kinds of circumstances, and what we decided to do at that point was, number one, pull up the side scan, get the charts out, and check all of our charts and see whether or not we could find some targets on the charts that were previously marked and nearby. At the same time, I decided to give Clive a call and have a discussion with him about the problems that we were having. When I called Clive, I found some very interesting information, and that was when Clive and his NUMA team did the original search, they used a navigational system called the DECA system, and this system is no longer in use. It's a system that relied on radio beacons that are beamed out from land posts, and you found your position based on these radio beacons. There are no more DECA beacons being put out. Someone had transcribed from the DECA position to a lat-long position, and the latitude-longitude position we had probably was incorrect based on a mistake of transposing them from one system to the other. At the same time I was talking with Clive, we came up with another point that was only a little less than 3 miles away that was on one of the Admiralty charts, and we thought, this is a real good chance that this is it. Let's go take a look. So we got the side scan back in the water and headed to this new position. When Mike resurfaced and gave his report, we were all quite discouraged. We really felt that we had a good chance of having that be the U-21, but Mike made it absolutely clear that what we had was a freighter, in fact a collier, that was turned upside down on the bottom, and it was the smooth shape of the hull that gave the appearance of a submarine on the side-scan sonar image. At this point, we knew that we had to move from just a filming project and go directly into search mode. It was going to be a real problem for us. We had 4.5 days of search time left, and the weather was deteriorating. We decided immediately to set up a 4 square mile search area and begin to tow the side scan very methodically through that area. And at the same time, as soon as we had that search pattern underway, we got back on the satellite phone and called every contact that we could think of around the Baltic to see if we could come up with any more information about specific points that could be shipwrecks in that area. After several calls, we were lucky enough to come up with a contact in France who actually had in his possession a chart that was done by the government of the Netherlands where they actually did a bottom survey in this area. And he provided us with 5 or 6 additional coordinates that really encircled the point that NUMA had given us to start this process. So we took those coordinates and transcribed them onto our sat-nav system on the boat, and at that point, once we had that display available to us, we decided to break off the grid search and go on a point-by-point search to see if we couldn't find U-21. We set out for the first target, which was about 7 miles from the original NUMA position that we had. As the vessel approached the target and we knew the side scan fish was just about to go over it, we all congregated at the screen, as we always do. And as the target appeared on the screen, it was clear that we had another wreck that looked a lot like a submarine. This one had the additional feature of not just having the long cylindrical shape, but also having something that could be a conning tower. At that point, what you have to do is just stop and make an assessment of the target and to decide really whether or not the target is good enough to stop and spend all of the time that's required to get divers into the water to really ground truth it and know for sure. So Mike and I and Captain Gary Goodyear talked for a while and decided this really was a good target. And even though we'd been fooled on the first one, this looked good enough to put divers in the water. And we immediately requested that Mike just get down and get dressed, and we'd go directly after this site. It's always a great pleasure to successfully conclude a shipwreck search. They don't always end successfully, and this one had a particularly rocky start. U-21 is a very important shipwreck historically. This is the first submarine to make a kill in the First World War, and her captain, Otto Hersing, set the precedent for submarine warfare in a number of different ways. Although U-21 was the first submarine to make a kill in the First World War, it wasn't the first submarine to make a kill in history. That submarine is the Hunley, and I can only imagine how Clive Cussler felt when, after 20 years of searching, he actually saw that submarine surface.